right, welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening to discuss the issue of social hosting and underage drinking. My name is Kendra Nagy, and I am a junior at Vero Beach High School. My classes are focused in the AP curriculum, where I'm challenged each day, and when I do have free time that's not used studying, I'm involved in the Vero Beach High School drama troupe, and I'm also on the varsity golf and tennis teams. Alongside this, my focus is in dance, primarily modern jazz and ballet. After graduating, I hope to pursue a higher education, hopefully at Fordham University in New York City, and possibly take on a career concerning international affairs. I, along with my partner Kiana, will be moderators for this evening. And I would now like for Kiana to introduce herself.
Hello everyone, I'm Kiana Cobb and I'm an 8th grader at Gifford Middle School. I'm currently enrolled in the Gifted and Honors program at Gifford Middle School, and I currently maintain straight A's. For extracurricular activities, I rowed the Indian River Rowing Club, and I also play the violin. Next year, I plan to go to Vero Beach High School, and I'm proud to be a fighting Indian.
I would now like to take this time to have the panel introduce themselves.
Good evening, I'm Robin Dapp. I'm the Executive Director of the Substance Awareness Center and the Chair for SAFIR, Substance Abuse Free Indian River.
Good evening, I'm Eric Flowers, Lieutenant of Public Affairs for the Indian River County Sheriff's Office.
Hello, I'm Leanna Erfer. I'm a psychiatrist here in Vero Beach, and I am the parent of a 15-year-old daughter who is at the Flick right now, and thank you for being here.
Hello, my name is Meredith Jones. I'm an attorney here in town. I practice in criminal defense, family law, and juvenile dependency. And I was the juvenile public defender for about a year in this town, and also practiced at the public defender's office otherwise. And now I'm in private practice.
Good evening, my name is Brian Lang. I'm the parent of a 17-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter.
So in this evening's program, each panel member will receive 3 questions. And during this time, I would like if the audience would please refrain from asking their questions, for there will be an allotted amount of time for them to ask their questions once the panel is done speaking. And here we go. First question. Ms. Dapp, what is our community's biggest challenge with regard to teen drug use?
Well, that is a great question. And the reason is because we have a lot of preconceived notions about what drugs are out there and available, and a lot of it is, when we think of drug abuse or drug use, I think that probably the first thing that comes to our minds are drugs like Oxycontin and heroin and maybe some of the synthetic drugs we're hearing about in the media. But the truth is, the drugs that we're really concerned with are probably the same drugs that were available for high school and middle school students when I was in school many, many years ago. And I'm going to show you a little graph. This graph is based on an instrument that we use here in Indian River County and throughout the state of Florida. It's called the Florida Youth Substance Abuse Survey. It's done every 2 years, and about 1,000 students in Indian River County take this survey. So it's pretty accurate, and a pretty large population of students actually use the survey. So I don't know if you can see this, but you'll see the big bar to your left represents alcohol use. And that is about 50% greater than the next item on the bar graph, which is marijuana. And the third item, which is quite small, it actually represents about 3.3% of the student population. That's cigarettes. And the fourth thing on the list, which is a little less, it's right around 2%, is prescription drugs. So by far, when we're looking at past 30-day drug use, we are looking at about 20% of our student population have reported that they've used alcohol in the past 30 days. So our biggest problem, of course, is the alcohol use. And I'd like to tell you just a few other statistics related to alcohol use. So 20% of our teens tell us that they drank in the past 30 days. And of those who drank, 26% tell us they drank more than 5 drinks. So about a quarter of the students that are drinking what we would call binge drinking. Thank you, Eric. And that's very concerning. Another pretty alarming statistic is just under 20% of the students that tell us they drink tell us they experienced at least one blackout in their lifetime, which is also very concerning. And 20% of all the student body, this is every kid in our high school, tell us that they have been in a car, a passenger in a car, with the driver who had been drinking. So all of those things are very concerning.
How are these kids accessing alcoholic beverages, and where are they drinking them?
Okay, so this is a phenomenon that's a little different than when I was in high school. So today, we are seeing the majority of kids, almost 80% of students tell us they are drinking in one of 2 places. And that is in their own home. 30% are telling us, right around 30%, that they're drinking in their own home. And about 46%, close to 50, are telling us they're drinking in another person's home. So that is the primary place. It's hitting close to 80% of students tell us that's where they drink. We also know that the number one, now again, all this is based on the survey that our students take, so this is what they're telling us. And they also tell us this to our faces when we meet with them, that the parties are happening in friends' homes or someone's home. The majority of kids, almost 50% of kids, tell us that somebody gave them the alcohol. They're not even buying the alcohol. And another percentage, which is pretty high, about 25%, tell us that they had someone purchase the alcohol for them.
What is SAFIR, and what is the coalition doing to reduce teen alcohol use?
Well, SAFIR stands for Substance Abuse Free Indian River. And SAFIR is our state-sanctioned coalition here in Indian River County. And SAFIR is comprised of, there's actually 12 sectors that are required to be a part of this group of stakeholders. But primarily it is the school district, and by the way, Dr. Rendell is here tonight, our superintendent of schools. And we also have some representatives here from St. Edward's. We have Mike Mirsky. Mike is in the back. And Bruce Walker. Did I say that right? Thank you. And Kira Murphy, all from St. Ed's. So thank you for being here. Our schools are probably our biggest partners in SAFIR. We do lots of programs. The agency that I work for provides our schools with life skills training. You may have heard this before. It's an evidence-based program that's provided to every single middle schooler in our county. So these are the types of things that we get together and we strategize and we determine what we need to do in our community to address our current drug problems here in the community. So as I've already said, we know that we have a real issue with the place where kids are accessing alcohol, and that is in homes. So we have some campaigns, and our primary campaign this year is called No One's House, and I hope that you've all heard about this. But basically it's a campaign for adults, for parents, and it's really about not allowing this to happen in your home and to take responsibility for what's happening in your home. Now that's a campaign for parents. We also have another one that is represented for parents, and that is Talk They Hear You. And Talk They Hear You is pretty simple. It's basically what it says. It's important to talk to your teens about alcohol and other drugs. And that's basically what this campaign is about as well. And then we have 2 campaigns for students. One is provided by the Sheriff's Office, which of course all the law enforcement agencies are also a big part of our coalition. And there is a program called Know the Law, and that program is taught, last year it was presented to every single middle schooler and high schooler, and it's really about, it's talking about the criminal offenses that are most commonly happening in our community by young people and what the consequences are for those offenses. And then there's one other program called Friday Night Done Right, which is a new one that we will be kind of bringing out this December, and that's going to be a fun, different venues for fun things to do on a Friday night.
Thank you, Ms. Staff.
You're welcome.
Lieutenant Flowers, what ramifications could result from a middle school or high school student being caught with alcohol?
So a lot of people don't realize, but if you're under 21 and you're caught with alcohol, you can actually be charged criminally for that. So someone who is under 21 can be arrested for possession of alcohol by a minor, and those charges can result in jail, up to 60 days in jail, possibly a probation, as well as up to a $500 fine. The biggest piece of this is if there's a second conviction, it jumps up to a first-degree misdemeanor in the state of Florida, which is punishable by up to a year in our jail, up to a $1,000 fine, and possibly probation. But the thing that really would hurt the teens, especially younger teens, high school teens, anybody, is that the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles has the ability to withhold the issuance of a driver's license to a new driver or to a current driver just based on a possession of alcohol charge. So if you're caught with alcohol, even if you're not driving, you could potentially there could be a time period where you're not able to get your license. So when you turn 15, 16, 17, even, you may still not be able to get your license, depending on how severe those charges are and what the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles determine.
Can an underage drinker be charged with DUI?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the legal limit for a person who is under 21 is much lower than it is for an adult. So if an adult, a person over 21, is stopped for driving and they're under suspicion of DUI, the legal limit is 0.08% of blood alcohol. For a teen driver, someone between 15, 16 who has a legal permit and 21, the alcohol level is 0.02. And I can tell you 0.02 is extremely low blood alcohol content. That's less than one drink. So if a teen were to have less than one alcoholic drink and made the terrible decision to drive, they would be arrested for DUI, they would be processed, and that again could go on to harm them for their license, for their college, for anything beyond that. So DUI is even more strict for minors than it is for adults.
Could an underage teen get in trouble for attending an open house party where alcohol is being served?
Absolutely. An underage teen could be charged with possession of an alcoholic beverage, like we talked about in the first question that you asked me. But there are also consequences for the parents, as Robin was discussing how there are these house parties. So in the state of Florida, we define an open house party essentially as a person having control of a residence. They may not allow an open house party. And in this definition, an open house party is a social gathering at a residence, which you talked about, where alcoholic beverages are being possessed or consumed. If the person knows that the alcoholic beverage is being consumed or possessed, and the person fails to take reasonable steps to prevent the possession or consumption of the alcoholic beverage or drug, they can be charged with a second-degree misdemeanor. And a second offense of that can be, again, increased to a first-degree misdemeanor, just like the first one we talked about. But the real serious piece here is a violation of this where the minor is harmed, serious bodily injury happens, the minor causes damage to somebody else or hurts somebody else, it increases the penalties for the parents. So it's not just the person, the people who are there, and we're going to stop everybody that's in that house. We're going to identify them. We're going to call parents. We're going to get them there to drive them home safely. Everybody's parents are going to know that we showed up to an open house party. But then the people who are there, the parents, are going to be charged as well with this open house party statute, which is a big problem. And we know it's a big problem in our community, and it's something that we take very seriously.
Thank you, Lieutenant Flowers. Dr. Erfer, what are the medical effects of underage/binge drinking, binge alcohol consumption?
Oh, thanks. I wanted to talk about first the general physical effects of alcohol and then transition into talking a little bit more about the effects on the brain, because I think for our purposes that's really what's more significant. But if you think about alcohol as being a toxic substance to most tissues and most cells, which it is, and think about vulnerable, young, developing bodies consuming alcohol, I think it helps you take it a little more seriously than maybe when you think about adults drinking alcohol. And that's really our focus, right? We're talking about underage, not fully developed, men and women. So if you think about alcohol as being a substance that we wouldn't typically want to have in our body, and we're exposing it to these more vulnerable bodies, I think that's a good context to keep in mind. So alcohol is it's a solvent, it's a flammable substance, it can be used to sanitize things, and it's really kind of caustic to tissues in the body. So in terms of physical effects, you can have erosion and inflammation throughout the body. So if you think about just drinking something that's got potentially toxic effects, you can have inflammation and irritation throughout the whole GI tract. So you can have throat, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, colon, irritation, inflammation, bleeding. And then when alcohol is absorbed into the bloodstream, you can get effects throughout the rest of the body. And I think in terms of what people might often think of, they think of liver effects, which is definitely a legitimate concern, or pancreas effects. There's toxicity to the liver, because the liver is what clears or metabolizes alcohol from our body. The liver can only handle so much alcohol. And we're talking about binge drinking or excessive drinking in teens. I mean, their livers are really not equipped to metabolize alcohol very well at all. So in terms of the body's effects, just think of those organs all potentially being negatively impacted by the presence of alcohol. Once the alcohol's in the bloodstream at whatever concentration, but we're talking about high concentrations, higher than the 0.02 that Lieutenant Flowers said. We're talking about probably closer to what the legal intoxication level for an adult would be, so 0.08. Because you're talking about teens binge drinking. They're drinking probably, at least 4 to 5 beverages on occasion, like Robin said, possibly more. I mean, drinking currently different from maybe how it was when Robin was referring to back in the day. Drinking nowadays is more like shot-based and large quantities in a short period of time. And it's not like sipping a glass of wine or having a beer. It's a much more rapid intake and more rapid concentration in the body. So, where was I? Oh, so in terms of going to the brain, you have the sense of alcohol being, for most people, something that is toxic. You might hear that alcohol kills brain cells, which is kind of a common description. And that isn't literally true, but it's definitely destructive to brain function. And it's destructive in several different ways. In utero, most people recognize that the fetus cannot tolerate much alcohol exposure at all. And that developing brain is so sensitive that you can have really bad outcomes if a woman is exposed to alcohol during pregnancy. Fetal alcohol syndrome is something that most people have some recognition of, and it's a real tragic demonstration of how destructive alcohol can be to the brain and to the central nervous system. But when we're talking about teens, we're talking about their brains, which are still developing. The brain's still developing into the mid-20s, unlike other organs, which are already pretty developed by late teens. So you have a vulnerable brain, and the parts of the brain that are being affected are primarily the prefrontal cortex. That is the kind of decision-making aspect of the brain. The prefrontal cortex in an adult is hopefully helping an adult make good decisions, kind of regulating the other impulses and the other parts of the brain that may be giving it feedback. But with a teenager, no offense to the teenagers that are here, but that part of the brain is still developing. And so when you add the fact that you've got a not fully formed prefrontal cortex and alcohol interfering with the functioning of that brain, you can see some real negative effects. The second part of the brain that's important to keep in mind is the temporal lobe. And in the temporal lobe, there's centers that are really important for learning and for memory and for processing information. So if you have a substance like alcohol that's interfering with that brain function, definitely kids are going to be more vulnerable. I mean, they're in a stage of life where they should be learning and consolidating information, and so they're particularly negatively affected by that. The third part of the brain, which is real obvious, is the cerebellum, and that's at the base of the brain, the area that controls motor function and balance and reflexes. And so when you think of kind of the motor effects of alcohol, like a staggering kind of a gait or a drunken appearing person, you're seeing the effects in the cerebellum. So these areas, all being potentially affected in a young person, can really lead to some bad outcomes.
Other than the medical effects, what are the other consequences of underage drinking?
I think if you just generalize from those, like central nervous system and brain effects, you can kind of imagine what the other secondary effects could be. That could be negative. So, for instance, talking about the learning centers being impaired, you'll see, underperformance in school and difficulty with attention and concentration, and kids who just don't seem to be able to apply their regular intelligence and intellect because there's an interference from alcohol. In terms of the frontal lobe interference, you see more risky behavior, more reckless behavior, sexual acting out, unprotected sex, more frequency of fights, and then impaired judgment in terms of leading to other drugs. So, young people who are drinking alcohol frequently or excessively are much more at risk to then transition to, other substances they might not otherwise have considered using. In the most kind of obvious negative secondary effects would be things that can be lethal, and the CDC keeps records of alcohol deaths that are directly related to, deaths that are directly related to the presence or the influence of alcohol. And so for young adults under 21, the last figures that I saw, which I think were 2014, it was 4,800 deaths in the United States. So that would be motor vehicle accidents, accidents like falls from heights, drownings, assaults, alcohol poisoning, suicide. These are actually lethal secondary effects of alcohol use that are measured by the CDC, which are unfortunately increasing, not decreasing, over the last decade. And then for me, in my field, what I think is underestimated is the secondary effect of addiction. Because when the brain's associated with and familiarized with alcohol early on, it becomes much more likely to continue that pattern. And the statistic that I saw that I thought was the most telling was that if a young man or a young woman is exposed to alcohol prior to 15, they're 4 times more likely to develop alcohol dependency in the years that follow. So that's a profound secondary effect.
How can you tell if a person has developed a problem with alcohol?
That's a tough one. I think as parents, we don't want to imagine that our children have developed a problem with alcohol. So I think the first thing is to recognize that it could very much be your child who's there sleeping in their bedroom in your house. And taking the time to look and listen, and then to talk about what you see. So I think in the context of talking about social hosting and underage drinking, for our purposes tonight, it would be to obviously observe further the signs. If you see evidence of drinking, if you see cans and bottles and Yeti cups and you're not sure what the beverage is in there, you need to know. You need to be asking and looking. And if you see changes in your child's physical appearance, if you see bloodshot eyes and sleeping in and complaints about nausea and vomiting and basically hangover symptoms, you need to discuss them. You can't downplay or minimize physical signs. And then I think a lot of the social and behavioral changes are kind of decline in functioning, changes in performance in school, changes in interests, changes in peer groups, things that just look like something has shifted and you don't have an explanation as to why. And then talking openly with not just your child, but with the other parents and the other peers, and being candid about the fact that it's not something to hide or be ashamed of, but to address openly.
Thank you, Dr.
You're welcome.
Ms. Jones, what are the potential criminal penalties for allowing underage drinking at your home?
Well, Lieutenant Flowers kind of talked about some of those and what the laws on hosting a party can be. I'm probably going to go off script here, so just indulge me for a moment. I know some of the questions that I was asked to talk about today really dealt with the penalties, whether they be criminal or civil or family law related as they relate to drinking. And I was thinking a lot about that this week, and I don't want to come here and feel like I'm talking to a room full of parents and trying to scare them into doing the right thing through the potential consequences. Again, I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I have a basic belief that people act out of either love or fear. And I would encourage all of you to be acting out of love. And I think I need to demonstrate that by not trying to scare you tonight. Lieutenant Flowers, Dr. Erfer, Robin Dapp talked already tonight, and one of the common themes is talking to your children. And I practice in some interrelated areas of law, family law. Like I said, I do a lot of work with juveniles through family law, through criminal defense, through the dependency court system, and that's just really an unfortunate system. And Dr. Erfer's comment, and I know that our parent reacted to that as well, that when you're exposed to alcohol under 15, that your chance of alcohol dependence goes up so high. And I see so many young parents, in their 20s, late 20s, early 30s, who are so addicted to substances and are having children, and they want to get their lives together so badly and they can't. And it's just incredibly sad. So I am fully in support of the talk, they hear you idea. Again, through my work, it's so important to be able to resist an overly punitive way of dealing with teenagers. It doesn't work. Those Scared Straight programs, they don't work. They're counterproductive. When children get into the juvenile justice system, all the research on juvenile justice is that it's supposed to be a rehabilitative system. It's not supposed to be a punishment system. Unfortunately, I would say if you talk to any of my juvenile clients, they would tell you it feels very punitive and very punishment-based. It doesn't work. I mean, the research on juvenile justice says that every contact that a child has with the juvenile justice system, every night they spend in the detention center, is correlated to further involvement in the system. So, and I have people tell me all the time, oh, you represent these kids, and where are their parents, and why aren't their parents disciplining them, and all of that. And I see a lot of good parents in the system who are trying their best, but they've been parenting their children in an sometimes overly punitive manner, or they want the court to step in and punish or do something here. And it's really hard for people to change their approach, and I would just encourage parents as much as they can to change that approach and really develop the relationships with their children that will allow their children to come and talk to them about things. And again, from a legal perspective, it's so important. I see parents going through divorces, all kinds of just things that are traumatic experiences, and the stronger the relationship the parents have with their children, the better their overall outcomes are, and the more that they can get through otherwise really stressful periods in their life. Specifically about alcohol, we know that alcohol use, as Dr. Erfer says, lowers inhibitions. Again, talk to your children about that. Explain to them, and really, it's important for parents to engage in the reasons why they need to talk to their children about this, and the reasons why they need to resist social hosting. There's research that says that parents think that if they host a party in their own home, then, okay, I can control the outcome, I can see what's going on, I can make sure that this is done in a safe way, and if my children are in my house and they're drinking, it's okay. They're not gonna do it then somewhere else. But the research says that your kids are actually more likely to go do it somewhere else if they think that it's acceptable. So it's important to really look at what the facts and the research says about drinking in general and about social hosting, and why it is just not a good idea. And just, if you were going through a divorce and let's say you had your kid for the weekend and hosted an open party and, Lieutenant Flowers or one of his cohorts came out, that's not going to look so good in your divorce case, just FYI. But that's my one little scary thing today. But again, engage actually with what the research says and how to talk to your children and why it's so important to talk to them about this. Talk to them about those lower inhibitions and what kind of decisions they may make. And it's, recent cases all over the news about young men especially making really bad decisions when they're under the influence and acting in ways, towards women, towards young women that we would not want them to do. And let's hope that we can talk to our boys and not do those kind of things. Not have the idea that if inhibitions are lowered, that certain behaviors are more acceptable. Talk to them too. We talked about risky sexual behavior, like the warning signs, and it's not okay. I could go on and on about the potential criminal consequences with underage sexual activity, which I won't do. But again, you're making poor decisions when those things happen, and again, we know that teens are going to drink. We know that teens are going to engage in sexual activity. It happens. But we have to be able to have the relationships with our kids that we can talk to them. If something bad happens elsewhere at a party, but you have the relationship with your child that they can come tell you about it, that's a positive. But if they're afraid that, just don't drink and what are you doing at a party where there's alcohol, then they don't call you when, the driver has had a couple beers because they don't want to admit that they were in a bad situation. And I can probably speak for any of you in the room, you would rather have your kid call you or send you a text and be like, can you please pick me up, than have them get into a car with somebody who's been drinking. So our kids are only going to do that though if we've done that hard work and built those relationships with them. That was a really long answer.
What are some possible collateral consequences of a criminal charge?
Well, again, as Lieutenant Flowers said, if it's possession of alcohol by a minor, you can have your license suspended. There is a difference if the statute reads, possession of alcohol by someone under 21. So if you are technically at the age of majority, meaning 18, you can be charged in adult court and have those criminal penalties that Lieutenant Flowers was talking about. If you are underage, under 18, you could be charged in the juvenile system. And one of the big things is that it's so competitive to get into colleges nowadays that there are highly competitive colleges that see an arrest on your record, regardless of what happens with that case, regardless if you did a diversion or regardless of whether you got found not guilty at a trial or something like that. And they see that and they will just say, nope, sorry, you're not coming to the University of Florida. We have a whole bunch of other applicants who weren't arrested. And then of course there's the driver's license suspension, those types of things.
What civil penalties or other legal ramifications could there be?
Again, I feel like most parents generally have an idea of the law. If something happens and somebody gets hurt, you could be in trouble, But again, I don't really want to go into a bunch of that tonight because, again, this really is about how can we discourage this and how can we build those relationships in a strong enough community that's going to come together. And I think Robin said too about, and Dr. Urfer, about being comfortable talking to the other members of your community, the other parents about why this is important. And again, it just can't be because you might get caught. It can't be because of that. Because as seriously as this is taken, we all do things probably every day that aren't technically, within the color of the law. I'm a notorious speeder. But you can't have it just be the fear of getting caught, because most of the time you're probably not gonna get caught. But it's still important that we do the right thing.
Thank you, Ms. Jones.
Mr. Lang, do your children know the rules regarding parties and visiting friends' homes or kids visiting your home?
They do. I'd first like to point out that so far it's been statistics and, medical effects and laws and things like that. The hardest part is applying that, and it's, I'm sorry. I think that one of the more important things that have been said so far is having your kids not be afraid to come to you. If they think, oh my goodness, I'm in trouble there, but if I call my dad, it's not going to be worth what he's going to do or say. So I think being open and through love, I think you put it best, instead of fear is the best way to do it. As far as rules is where my kids go, what I expect, what is expected when kids come to my house, there has to be an adult there. There has to be somebody who has some sense. And typically that's somebody that's 18, 20 years old at least. I don't want to hear about so-and-so's older brother's there, things like that. Kids aren't allowed to be at our house unless my wife or I are there. And those are things that have been skirted by my son from time to time. We weren't inside, we were outside. Well, yeah, there were 10 of you outside. That's not the same. So yeah, they do know those rules, and they do get repeated often. The hard part is making sure that they're followed when they go somewhere else. And I think one of the things that excuse me, I'm fighting a cold, that I haven't been able to understand so far is that there's such a small percentage of parents who want to communicate with other parents. It's hard to get people on the phone, they just want to text. It's very odd to me that nowadays there are not enough parents that will have the same rules that I have. My rules aren't right, my rules aren't wrong, that's just what we do.
Thank you. In your opinion, what is the key to preventing underage drinking?
Again, I think open communication with your kids from an early age about drinking. If you don't drink in your home, it's a little easier to say don't drink. If you do drink in your home, we do drink in ours. We're social drinkers. We do have parties where people drink, and we don't tell our kids they can't be there. But they see how things, we don't have, super late night, everybody gets smash parties, but they see social drinking going on in our home. So it is a very difficult thing to try to tell them not to do. The accepted thing is that, okay, every kid's gonna drink, you just gotta have to deal with it. I kind of don't necessarily agree with that. There are ways that you can try to keep them from doing it, and I think some of the statistics that I've heard and some of the medical effects that I've heard, I had not heard the one about drinking under 15. That is amazing to me, and that will be discussed when we get home. It's a very difficult thing. My daughter being 12, it's not really, we haven't been faced with it. There's a lot of discussion about it, but there's also, I've realized even in the 6th grade it happens, and it's tough. With a 17-year-old son, yes, we've had those issues at home. I'm not gonna, we have had to deal with it, and you just try to learn from it and move on, and hope that my son learned something from it, and so did his friends.
So concerning age, when did you start talking to your kids about drugs and alcohol?
My wife and I actually did plan a little bit as to how we were going to have some of these bigger discussions, and in my opinion, drugs and alcohol it's a big thing. I think it's to be discussed early and often is a good way to put it, but the deadline is when they go from grade school to middle school. I just think that the scope of the influences they have on them in middle school is so much greater. Once they get into middle school, and that's when there's more social parties, that's when dances become a thing, that's when they have their friend group expands. That is just, at that point, if they don't know how you feel about drugs and alcohol by then, you are so far behind the game, in my opinion, there's no way. It's hard to recover if you haven't been talking about it at that point. So early and often is the best way that I can describe it.
And lastly, what are your feelings about social hosting?
I'll be honest, I don't understand it. It was something that, it was like a unicorn when I was a kid. You know, you heard that somebody that knew somebody, oh yeah, their parents had a party and they didn't care if everybody was drinking. I never came up against it. I've never seen it. I've never dealt with it. And dealing with this panel and dealing with these young kids here, it amazes me that it is a prevalent thing. And I don't understand how anybody can think that, okay, if you're at my house binge drinking, I can at least make sure that you're not going to go hurt yourself or hurt somebody else. Well, just binge drinking in general at that age is hurting themselves. So I don't understand. Like I said, I don't understand it. I don't condone it. I don't see how any. I would welcome any parent to explain to me why they think it's a good thing. And I would welcome anybody here who thinks that it is and wants to talk about it. I would really hope that you would, because I don't see how any parent can think that that's a good idea.
Thank you all for this information. It's very valuable for our parents and youth in the community. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add before I open the discussion to the audience?
Can I just add one thing?
Sure.
I just wanted to second what you both said about, you said, know the statistics, and the statistics about social hosting they're pretty straightforward. There's no evidence that it safeguards children or helps them, understand about their tolerance or how much they can drink. You'll hear, I've talked to parents who think it's a safe idea or a preferable idea, and you'll hear explanations or rationalizations that include those, keeping them safe, right under my roof. Well, not really, because drinking at that age isn't safe. But then also this idea that the child or the teenager will learn about tolerance and will learn how to manage the fact that there's an alcohol interference with their brain function, and no one can do that. I mean, once that's happened, you've lost your ability to do that. So those answers don't pan out, and all the statistics show that social, all the ones that I've seen, that social hosting just promotes earlier exposure, more frequent exposure, and more excessive exposure to alcohol, which are all exact opposite trends that we would like to see.
I just want to share what Meredith said about parenting, folks who are going through divorces, they're having tough times talking to their kids. You're absolutely right, you have to talk to the kids. There are resources available to you right here in our community for folks who are dealing with that. Castle is a great organization. They're there to help out with parenting skills. If you're just struggling with basic parenting issues, we have resources available here in the community that can help you with that and help you talk to your children, help you have that third party that will come in and say, here's, we're going to teach you how to sit down at the dinner table and have dinner tonight. And it may be just little components like that that make a big difference for your family. So good work.
And I will add just one more thing too, and I'll get back to a little more data, because that's what I like to do. I'm going to show you one more graph, and this one's really small. But if you look at the first column, you will see that the big blue line to the left. That is alcohol in 2010. And then the little green one, which is about, not quite half, is alcohol use in 2016. So even though we're dealing with a very, very serious issue, and we're seeing a phenomenon that's happening in our homes that's very concerning, alcohol use does appear to be less frequent than it was just 6 years ago. So that is the good news, and it does show that when we get together and plan and strategize and work together, we really do see some change, and a change in a positive way.
Thank you all. Now, does anybody in the audience have any questions they would like to ask the panel or my partner and I? Yes.
Do you want to send the mic out there? Do you want to send the mic out? Yes.
Have you made the decision not to use alcohol, and if yes, why?
Yes, I made the decision not to drink alcohol because I know the negative effects alcohol has on my body and also the mental effects of alcohol in a teen. So I won't be drinking alcohol.
Yes, go ahead.
I was just wondering, do you know how, or how your parents feel about social hosting, your personal parents?
Personally, my parents do not condone drinking in the household or drinking at anybody else's house, so that's just how my parents handle that situation. Same with Kiana.
Thank you, ladies, I appreciate it. I wanted to ask, how do you rise above the influence of underage drinking, being a teenager yourself?
Just surrounding yourself with friends that do the right thing and know what the right choice is to make, that really helps you with peer pressure and all that's going on. Just knowing the consequences that it will have on you personally, that really helps you rise above and make the right decisions.
It's also with me, friends. I've changed friend groups a few times just because of the choices the friend groups that I've been in have made. So the friends that I have now, we all make amazing decisions, and drinking alcohol and any of the other bad things out there, I'm pretty sure we won't be doing any of those.
Have your parents spoken to you about underage drinking?
Yes, my parents have talked to me about underage drinking, and they've been talking to me about it for a few years now, since around the age of 10, and they've showed me the importance of not drinking at the age that I am now, and even later on in life because of the effects it can have on you. And yes, my parents have told me only a bit might be okay, but when you're older.
Any questions for the panelists? Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I first want to thank our very impressive, professional, and passionate panel. Please give them a round of applause. I know through their expertise and their passion, we are all going to go home and we are going to get around that piece of wood in our homes and start talking to our children, and our children will talk to their parents. I also want to thank especially our student moderators, Kendra and Kiana. Please step forward, will you please? Please give them a round of applause. We could not have done this town hall without our panel and without our moderators, but there are so many of you in the audience. I want to thank you. If you're a parent, please raise your hand. Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause. Parents are the heartbeat of America. And if you are a student, a youth, please stand. Please stand, the youth, the students in our audience. Let's give these wonderful youth leaders a round of applause. Thank you so much. I would like to thank Dr. Rendell, and I'd like to thank Mr. Mursky and Ms. Murphy and Mr. Wachter from St. Edward's and our school district for coming. And we have a principal here, Liz Tetrold, a wonderful partner. Thank you so much for coming, and all of you here tonight. You have made Indian River County paradise. That is why Indian River County is paradise, because of all of you and all the wonderful work you're doing. Please join us at SAFIR. Our passion is to keep our community substance-free, keep these wonderful children safe and healthy and vibrant for the future. And we all know that prevention is a partnership, and it really does work. And so together, we will continue to make a remarkable difference. So thank you so much. Hello. The experts have spoken, and the message received. Social hosting and underage drinking are inappropriate, unacceptable, dangerous for the brain and the body, and illegal. When our children are young, we hold their hand when they're crossing the street. Why do we let go when they reach middle school and high school? My name is Christina DeFalco. I am the director of SAFIR, Substance Abuse Free Indian River, our county coalition. Our mission is to empower and mobilize our community to reduce the use of alcohol, marijuana, and other drugs by Indian River County youth through education, support, collaboration, and action. SAFIR is a community-wide prevention coalition, your coalition. Please join us in our mission of keeping our children safe and healthy and free from substance use. Call SAFIR at 772-770-4811 or visit our website at www.safirc.org for more information. Please join our coalition today. We meet the first Thursday of every month at the Boys and Girls Club in Vero Beach, and together we will keep our children safe and healthy and free from substance use because we love them and we care. Thank you and good night.